Another Trump lawyer confessing to election crimes today. Jenna Ellis, shown here in her mugshot in Georgia, now a convicted felon, the third Trump lawyer to confess and flip within 1 week. The dominoes keep falling in this RICO case. Last week, of course, ended with two lawyers who used to represent Donald Trump going into court, confessing and pleading guilty. Ellis now joins them. I want to show you briefly all three of these guilty pleas together.
How do you plead guilty?
Guilty.
Guilty.
There it is. In all, this is now the fourth total conviction in the RICO cases. D.A. Willis is 4-0. The key Trump lawyer convicts are, of course, the higher up in the food chain of this chart. The other two Trump lawyers, well, they pled out on the eve of a trial that was actually scheduled to begin this week. If they hadn't pled guilty, we'd be covering that right now. Ms. Ellis was not about to start an imminent trial. She rushed back to court today as her own choice, reacting to the growing pressure from her convicted colleagues, trying to get a deal while she still can. What you see here, this new footage, is from that Atlanta courtroom today. Ellis's plea is also different from some of the other things we heard in the other two plea deals. We will show you that in moments ahead. I also want to tell you, to be clear, that her guilty plea does build on a point that we have been reporting on, how when the dominoes start falling in these cases, well, they can fall faster and faster and faster. Ellis pleading guilty today to the felony count of aiding and abetting false statements, basically fraud, to try to steal an election. And those lies were pitched, among other places, to members of the Georgia Senate at a specific meeting where she and other Trump attorneys and aides were trying to get Georgia to steal the votes of its own constituents. It may have seemed far-fetched. Some crimes are far-fetched. Today, the lies in service of that are themselves a crime. Now, as for this court hearing today, Ms. Ellis spoke longer than the other two Trump convicts. She was at times clearly, visibly emotional. She read a statement that she wrote today that expresses what she called remorse and also broke with her years of lies and misconduct on behalf of Donald Trump. So she did do that. On the other hand, she also today, in her words, continued to try to muddle or dodge accountability by blaming others. She tried to blur the context of her own now convicted crime. She suggests that the established fact of Donald Trump's loss was actually something she claims today that she was duped into believing by others. That is a narrative that minimizes the obvious lies that she and Rudy Giuliani peddled. And after I show you the facts of today's courtroom, I will say a little bit more about that in our report tonight. But first, her remarks ran in total about 1.5 minutes. And for you, we are going to air them in full now.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court. As an attorney who is also a Christian, I take my responsibilities as a lawyer very seriously, and I endeavor to be a person of sound moral and ethical character in all of my dealings. In the wake of the 2020 presidential election, I believed that challenging the results on behalf of President Trump should be pursued in a just and legal way. I endeavored to represent my client to the best of my ability. I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information, especially since my role involved speaking to the media and to legislators in various states. What I did not do, but should have done, Your Honor, was to make sure that the facts the other lawyers alleged to be true were in fact true. In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse. For those failures of mine, Your Honor, I have taken responsibility already before the Colorado bar who censured me, and I now take responsibility before this court and apologize to the people of Georgia. Thank you.
There you have it. Now, there are very few style points that matter in court. Ellis got a plea deal because she'll testify against others, not based on the words in that statement. In fact, the other two convicted Trump lawyers didn't offer any statements at all. So people can assess or dismiss what she said in court today. What matters is what she will do, and of course, what she now admits she did. There will be recorded testimony. by her and these other lawyers that will be used later in this RICO coup case. She'll be required to testify truthfully. And those who followed the news in 2020 will see a glaring contrast from today's Jenna Ellis, a convicted felon, telling this fairly new story to the judge, to the lawyer and spokesperson who used her role as a means to lie and cheat and undercut public trust in American democracy and the honest administration of elections in ways that proved profoundly damaging and at times literally dangerous.
This is an elite strike force team that is working on behalf of the president and the campaign.
I don't think any honest person can look at all of this and say, yeah, this was an election that was conducted fairly.
There is substantial and more than enough evidence to show that this election was irredeemably compromised.
That's what the Democrats do. If they don't like the rules, they change them.
The election was stolen and President Trump won by a landslide.
This is the county that had the switch of 6,000 votes from President Trump to Joe Biden.
As long as I know that I'm pursuing truth and I'm doing the right thing for God and my country, that's all that matters.
What do you want people to take from this? Here's my big question. What is the point of all this?
Well, the point of this, of course, is to get to fair and accurate results.
I relied on others, including lawyers with many more years of experience than I, to provide me with true and reliable information.
It is not about overturning an outcome. It is about making sure that election integrity is preserved.
I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump.
If I knew then what I know now. This is the new convicted Ellis. It's a familiar sentiment. It's actually one captured in an iconic song by Faces. I wish that I knew then what I know now. When I was younger, I wish that I knew what I know now when I was stronger. And in that sense, knowingly or not, she is tapping into an appealing sounding narrative. And remember, these convicts, and that is their legal status now, these people are convicts. These MAGA convicts are also lawyers and communication operatives. They are skilled in narrative. So they lean on that kind of narrative. I wish I knew. But factually, these election crimes are not some youthful indiscretion. These crimes, now convicted, are not the mistakes that people make as they grow up and make friends and fall in love and out of love. That's not the correct genre. And that's especially not the case with lawyers who have a job and a salary and an oath, all based on a very clear, researched understanding of what the law is. The evidence and now the legal process shows these lawyers, including Ms. Ellis, crossed those very clear, obvious, long-standing criminal lines. And they did it for the worst reasons, not what comes sometimes in court it could be called a mitigation or what you get for lenience. They did it for the worst reasons, for their own self-interest, their sense of power, their desire to overthrow your government. Now, Ellis did mention those consequences in that statement today, including the sanctions she already received from the bar. Today's punishment includes probation and a fine and her vowing to cooperate. So if you're counting where we go from here, as people think about dominoes, well, of the top key RICO defendants, fully 1/3 of them are now cooperating witnesses against the remainders, against Meadows, Eastman, Clark, Giuliani, and of course, defendant Trump. As for what Ellis knows the prosecutors could use in any future criminal trials, I'll tell you right now, she wrote memos about trying to get Pence to steal the race by claiming power to toss votes in Washington on January 6th. She had that earlier indictment for trying to get a public officer to violate their oath. Prosecutors documented at least 10 acts that she took with Giuliani, including, as mentioned, the lies to the state legislature. In fact, we know what it looked like. This was the December 3rd, 2020 hearing. You can see her there seated to Giuliani's left. What you see on your screen in total is now her confessed crime. If anyone ever says, well, did it really happen? Or how did it go down? Or I don't believe the media. You don't have to believe the media. On this one, you can just believe Jenna Ellis under oath because she confessed. She is remorseful. She says Oh, if she knew, she wouldn't have done it. Ellis admits multiple claims today about election fraud that occurred at the hearing you just saw there. They were false. Some of them so obviously so, like the completely made-up claim that 60,000 people who were underage, minors, somehow registered to vote, and that not a few dead people with voting rolls mistakes might have been miscounted. No, that 10,000 people rose like zombies from the dead and voted. D.A. Willis overall has implicated, as we've shown you, at least 6 plots in the original indictment. Ellis's guilty plea goes to lying, and her underlying indictment goes to Georgia overturning votes in that meeting that you saw. That's indicted. Others may still yet face that consequence. Chesbrough and Powell's guilty pleas went to the arrows you see here, the fake electors plot and the voting data breach. Those are now convicted. These colors here are based only on the legal process in Georgia. So when they flip red, that's not, again, the media or someone else deciding that. That means these are now convicted crimes. Before the guilty plea, Ellis had also complained Trump wasn't funding her legal defense. That's how it started. Then the other pleas came in, and then she decided she'd rather be the third domino among the Trump aides than, say, the fourth or the fifth. We hear about this very classic comparison to dominoes because this is what you're witnessing in the RICO case by a DA who clearly knows how to bring a large, complex RICO case and get people talking and cooperating. What's true tonight is something very clear. When you look at what's happened, it is now a legal and journalistic and public reality fact that 3 people who worked for Donald Trump as his lawyers all confess and admitted together they committed crimes to try to steal the election.